The message comes on a Thursday night. Gemma is on her sofa, half watching something she can't even name later, when her phone buzzes with a follow request from an account she doesn't recognize. She almost ignores it. Almost. But the username is a full name. Real name, no numbers, no underscores. And something in the way it sits on screen makes her hesitate. She taps the profile. The bio reads, photographer, dog mom, previously very, very confused. There are 47 posts. Warm aesthetic. Golden hour, coffee cups, a dog with the most expressive eyebrows. Normal. Wholesome even. The kind of account that takes a moment to form an impression of. Gemma scrolls. And then she stops. Because in the third photo down, leaning against a car she recognizes, wearing a jacket she has seen folded on a chair in a room she has been inside, is Connor. She sits with that for a long moment. She accepts the follow request. 30 seconds later, the DM arrives. Hi, I know this is strange. I've been trying to decide whether to reach out for about 3 weeks. I think we need to talk. That's how it starts. Not with a confrontation, not with a caught red-handed moment or a dramatic scene. It starts with a follow request and 8 words that quietly dismantle the story Gemma has been living inside for the last 18 months. Because here's what Gemma has told herself, in the absence of anything better. That she and Connor just didn't make it. That the relationship cooled the way some relationships do, gradually, then all at once. That no one was truly to blame. That she had missed some signs maybe, but only the quiet ones. The kind you're not supposed to be cataloging when you love someone and believe they love you back. She has been telling herself that for a year and a half. The message on her screen is suggesting she may need a different story. Gemma is 34. She met Connor at 29 at a friend's birthday dinner where they'd been seated next to each other by accident, or what felt like accident, and talked for so long the restaurant started shutting off lights around them. She remembers thinking, this one is different. Not because he was larger than life. He wasn't. He was funny and steady and genuinely curious, good at asking questions and actually absorbing the answers. She didn't have to perform for him, not even in those early weeks when performance is usually at its most exhausting. They moved in together after 14 months. By the next year, they were talking about what the decade ahead might look like. Gemma was all the way in, the way you can only be when someone has earned it slowly, which is the only way she's ever known how to do it. And then something shifted. It didn't happen in a day. It happened the way temperature drops, so gradually you don't register the change until you look up and realize you're cold, and you have no memory of it getting that way. Connor grew busier, more distracted. Not in ways she could hold up and point to. He was still there, still present enough that she couldn't name the absence precisely. She told herself it was work, a phase, the natural gravity shift after years of closeness. She waited for it to lift. She tried not to crowd him. By month 41, she had stopped mentioning the future out loud. By month 43, they had a conversation that was quiet and careful and devastatingly civil. And by the end of it, 4 years was over. He told her he just didn't think he had more to give right now. She thanked him for being honest. They split their shared things without a fight. She moved out. She let the story be what he'd offered. 2 people who cared but couldn't align. For 18 months, that story has held. She types back, "I'm listening." The reply comes immediately, like the woman on the other end has been sitting there with her hands already over the keyboard. "His name is Connor, right? We were together for 2 years. It ended 8 months ago. The way he explained it to me, I just don't think I was ready to hear what it actually meant until now." Gemma reads it twice, puts the phone face down on the sofa, stares at the ceiling, does the math. 2 years, ending 8 months ago. 8 months ago, Gemma and Connor had already been separated for 10 months. She picks the phone back up. What did he say? When it ended, what reason did he give you? The response takes a little longer. When it comes, it's one sentence. He said he just didn't think he had more to give right now. Gemma doesn't respond right away. She sets the phone down, picks it up, sets it down again. The apartment she moved into after Connor, smaller than what they shared, but hers, feels very still. She opens her messages to Connor's contact. There's nothing there for 9 months. She scrolled to the end of it once, a few weeks after moving out, just to see how it looked. Like all the important conversations in her life, it ended mid-thread, in the ordinary middle of something, before either of them knew it was an ending. She closes it, goes back to the DM. Can I ask, what were you told about why it ended? The woman, her name is Isla, she's already gathered that much from the profile, takes a few minutes to reply. He said he wasn't in the right place, that it wasn't about me, that he cared about me but he didn't have more to give. Gemma reads it once, then again. Didn't have more to give. She and Isla talk for 3 hours that first night. Not in a frantic way. Slowly, carefully, the way two people do when they're each trying to make sure they're understanding correctly before they go any further. They piece together a timeline. Connor and Gemma, 4 years, ending 22 months ago. There had been roughly a 4-month gap. Then Connor and Isla, 2 years, ending 8 months ago. In between those relationships, he had apparently been, according to Isla's research, which is thorough, briefly involved with someone else. No confirmed length, a name that surfaces in old tagged photos before being removed. They set that aside for now. What they're focused on is the overlap between their own experiences. Not in dates, those don't overlap. In texture. Isla had met Connor through mutual friends. He had been attentive in a way that felt rare, present, generous with his time, the kind of person who remembered the small things you mentioned weeks ago. Gemma had felt that too, exactly that. She had described it to her best friend at the time as feeling seen, embarrassed by the word even as she used it, because it's the word everyone uses, but it was the only one that fit. The first year had been, by Isla's account, close to perfect. The second year was when it shifted. Not in any single dramatic way. In degrees, increasing unavailability, a growing sense that she was reaching for someone who was still present enough that she couldn't justify the unease. By month 22, he told her he didn't think he had more to give. Gemma is very quiet for a long moment. Then she types, "How long into the relationship did things start to change?" "About 14 months in," Isla writes. "Why?" Gemma takes a breath. "Because that's exactly when it started with me." It's almost midnight when they agree to keep talking. Not tonight. Tonight has already done what it needed to do. But soon. There is more to map. Neither of them is ready to name what they think they're looking at. Not yet. But they both know they're looking at something. Gemma lies in the dark for a long time after. She is not thinking about Connor with anything she would call strong emotion. What she's feeling is more precise than that. A specific, unsettling clarity. Like a photograph coming into focus that she assumed was just slightly blurred, only to discover the blur was deliberate. She thinks about the words she used, privately, during that final conversation. She had thanked him for being honest. If this story is making you feel something you've been carrying without a name, if you've ever sat with an explanation that felt like it almost fit, but not quite, come find us. We're building something here. Subscribe so you don't miss where this goes, because this is the part where it gets very, very specific. 3 days pass before Isla sends a follow-up. "I've been thinking about something. Do you have time to talk properly? Not DMs. Can I call?" Gemma says yes. They speak for 90 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. Gemma sits at her kitchen table with a coffee she forgets to drink. Isla's voice is careful and measured. She sounds like someone who has rehearsed for this conversation, or maybe just someone who has thought about very little else for several weeks. They go through it methodically, start at the beginning, and move forward. Isla describes the first dinner she and Connor had, how long it ran, how she'd felt immediately struck by how well he listened. Gemma says nothing. Isla describes the first few months, the remembered details, the sense of being fully seen, the feeling that this was different from other things. Gemma says, "He used to remember things I mentioned in passing, weeks later. I assumed it was just how he was." Isla goes quiet for a moment. "He remembered the name of my childhood dog. I mentioned it once, in passing, in the 3rd week." They start comparing specifics. The holidays he always managed to be unavailable for. Work, family, never a clear reason, just a reason. The way he spoke about his future in hypotheticals that always excluded them without explicitly doing so. The way the conversations about what came next eventually stopped. Not because they fought, but because he would redirect, gently, so smoothly that she'd find herself talking about something else before she'd registered the deflection. The way he ended things. Not dramatically, not with cruelty, with sadness, genuine, or convincingly so. And a sentence about not having more to give, and a care for her well-being that made it impossible to be angry, that made anger feel like a misreading. Isla says, "I actually comforted him at the end. I told him it was okay, that I understood." Gemma doesn't respond right away, because she did the same thing. This is the part that sits heaviest. Not the betrayal of one thing, but the precision of it. Because anyone can arrive at the same exit line by accident. Relationships end. People run out of words. Sometimes the same sentence occurs to 2 different people independently. But this isn't the same sentence. It's the same architecture, the same emotional rhythm, the same arc, the same 14-month window before the shift, the same gentle, loving withdrawal that was designed, or had the effect, whether designed or not, of making the woman on the other end feel like the ending was mutual, clean, no one's fault. The same outcome. A woman left with an explanation she couldn't quite argue with. An explanation that would hold, indefinitely, unless someone compared it to another explanation. Isla says, "I started looking for the woman before me. I wasn't sure I should, but I did." Gemma waits. "I found one tagged photo, an account that's been made private. I can't reach her." They sit with that for a moment. Then Isla says, "Do you think there were others?" Gemma looks out the window. It's the kind of question that sounds like it should be hard to answer. It isn't. Think about the last time you told yourself a story about someone that turned out to be much simpler than you made it. Drop it in the comments. You don't have to name anyone. We'll know what you mean. Because Gemma is about to find out that the story she's been living inside has a few more pages she was never given. Gemma spends the next week not searching. She's aware of this choice the way you're aware of not eating. Not absence, but decision. She tells herself it's because she doesn't need to, that she has enough already, that adding more information won't change the fundamental shape of what she's looking at. By the 6th day, she starts searching. She goes back through 4 years of her own memory methodically, not emotionally. She's past the phase where this produces grief, more like archaeology, looking at what was there with cleaner eyes. The early months, all warmth, all attention, nothing that troubles her even in retrospect. This wasn't someone performing interest he didn't feel, or if it was a performance so sustained and detailed it functioned as the real thing. The middle stretch, good, genuinely good. She doesn't revise this. It would be easier, in some ways, to decide the whole thing was hollow. But she doesn't believe that. and she's not interested in a version of clarity that requires dishonesty. The shift. Subtle. So gradual she had no purchase on it. And she now understands, not with anger, just with sight, that this is the methodology. Not a deliberate cruelty, maybe, but a pattern that functions with a kind of consistency that cruelty would envy. She calls Isla on Tuesday. "I've been thinking about the timeline," she says. 4 months between us. "Yes, that's not very long." "No," Isla says. "It isn't." The implication is one neither of them states directly. 4 months is not enough time to genuinely process the end of a 4-year relationship, rebuild, and arrive somewhere new with honest intentions. 4 months is, at most, a gap. Gemma thinks about the months before their relationship ended. Connor, by then, had been emotionally elsewhere for close to a year. She had been reaching, patient, trying not to crowd, telling herself it was a phase. Now she does different math. If he was already at some emotional distance from her 12 months before they ended, and if Isla began 4 months after the ending, she stops that line of thought. Not because it's wrong, because she can see exactly where it leads, and she needs a minute before she goes there. She asks Isla, "In the first month you were together, how did he seem? Was he over his last relationship?" Isla is quiet for a moment. He said it had ended naturally, that they'd grown apart. He seemed fine, present. I didn't question it. Did he mention her much? Once or twice, always the same way. Kind, a little sad, nothing specific. Like it was a chapter that had simply closed. Gemma recognizes that description precisely. It is how he spoke about the relationship before hers, in those early weeks when they were still learning each other's histories. Kind, a little sad, a chapter that had simply closed. There is a specific mechanism at work here that Gemma is starting to name. Not lying exactly, or not only that, something more efficient. A way of presenting the emotional narrative of one's own life that makes you sympathetic, approachable, available, without leaving fingerprints. The story he told about the past made him look like a man who loved and lost, who carried that with appropriate weight, who was now genuinely present for someone new. It didn't raise questions because it wasn't designed to. It was designed to lower them. Gemma thinks about the word she keeps returning to. Architecture. Not one lie, a structure. The private account has a name. Gemma finds it through a different route than Isla tried. Not through Connor's tagged photos, but through a friend of a friend connection that surfaces when she looks more carefully. The account has been private for over 3 years. The profile photo is a plant, an ordinary fern, no face. She sends a follow request with a short message. "I'm not here to cause anything. I think we might have someone in common." She doesn't expect a response. She gets one in 4 hours. Connor? Her name is Bex. She is 36. She was with Connor for 3 years, ending, by her account, approximately 5 months before Gemma met him. Gemma does not tell her about Isla immediately. She listens first. Bex has had years to process this, or to try. She speaks about the relationship without visible emotion, the kind of flatness that arrives after you've told a story enough times that it no longer produces a reaction in you. She describes the beginning, warmth, attention, a quality of presence that felt rare. She describes the shift, around 13 months in. She describes the ending. He said he didn't have more to give. She says, "I told him it was okay, that I understood." There are now 3 of them, 3 different women, 3 different years, 3 relationships with a consistency so structural, it makes the word coincidence not just inadequate, but actually dishonest. The beginning, genuine warmth, the kind that doesn't feel manufactured, and maybe wasn't. The middle, 12 to 16 months, slow withdrawal, increasing unavailability, nothing you could grip. The end. Same exit, same emotional framing. The woman left with an explanation she couldn't argue with. An explanation that positioned the ending as mutual, organic, no one's fault. The gap before the next, 3 to 5 months. And the woman who came before, always described to the next one as a chapter that had simply closed. Beck says something that neither Gemma nor Isla has said yet. I don't think he knows he does it. They're all three on a call now, Gemma, Isla, Bex, and the silence after this lands is a particular kind. Not agreement, not disagreement, just the weight of a possibility that makes everything simultaneously more and less forgiving. Because if it's deliberate, it's a different thing. If it's not, if this is something he does without full awareness, a pattern that runs beneath his own understanding, it doesn't mean the three of them weren't shaped by it. It doesn't mean the exits didn't cost something, but it complicates the narrative in ways that matter. Gemma says, it doesn't actually change what it was. A pause. Beck says, no, it doesn't. Isla says nothing, but Gemma can hear her breathing, and it sounds like agreement. What they sit with, after all the timelines have been mapped, after the structural similarities have been named and sat beside each other, is not rage. Not primarily. There's something sharper than rage available, something more sustainable. It's the understanding that the story each of them was given was designed, consciously or not, to make them the last one to see the full picture. The woman who came before her was a closed chapter. Clean, no residue. That narrative made Connor legible, a man who had simply moved forward. It also made the previous woman invisible, untraceable. It made the question, has this happened before, feel unnecessary, even unkind to ask. And in its absence, the pattern continued. Gemma thinks about that. The deliberate or accidental genius of it. The architecture didn't require deception at every point. It just required that each woman be positioned as the beginning of something, never as one in a sequence. That the story of what came before always be told gently, sadly, finally, so that curiosity felt like intrusion. She thinks about the words she used in that last conversation when he said he didn't have more to give. She thanked him for his honesty. The three of them don't stay in close contact after that call. There's no dramatic rupture. They simply reach the end of what they needed from each other. They have mapped the thing. They have seen it. The work of the conversation is done. Beck sends a message a few days later. I genuinely hope this helped. Gemma says it did. Isla sends a voice note, brief, warm, signing off. And then Gemma is alone with it. She spends a few days doing what she suspects all three of them are doing in their own apartments. Not obsessing, but integrating. Letting the revised version of the story settle into the space where the previous version lived. Here is what she knows now that she didn't know before. The relationship was real. She doesn't revise that. What they had in the good years was genuine, or it functioned as genuine, which might be the same thing, and might not, and she's decided she doesn't need to resolve that particular question. What was not real was the ending. Not the ending itself, relationships end, but the framing of it. The exit had been constructed with sufficient care that she was left holding an explanation she couldn't quite argue with. An explanation that positioned her loss as mutual, clean, nobody's fault, just life. That explanation had cost her something. It had cost her 18 months of mostly believing she had simply been part of a story that ended, of not looking too closely, of telling herself that the alternative, that the ending had been managed, was too uncharitable to sit with. What she comes back to, again and again, is not what he did. It's what the architecture was for. Because here is the thing about an exit that's designed to be smooth. It works. The woman on the other end is left without enough clarity to be clearly angry, without enough evidence to be clearly certain, with just enough care that she can't quite justify any strong feeling without looking like she's misreading. She is made uncertain of her own read. That's the mechanism. That's the cost. And the cost of that uncertainty is exactly this. You spend 1.5 years, or 2 years, or 3, working with incomplete information, building your understanding of yourself and of that time and of what happened on a foundation that was never meant to be true. You don't grieve the relationship correctly because you were never given the real reason. Gemma is not catastrophizing. She is not rewriting the entire previous 4 years into something ugly. She is doing something more precise than that. She is adjusting one variable and watching everything recalibrate. She thinks about the 18 months she spent being kind to herself, about the ways she might have contributed. All the introspection, the second-guessing, the careful openness to her own culpability. She did that work honestly, because that's how she does things. She examined herself with more rigor than she ever aimed at Connor, because she had more access to herself, and because she wanted to be fair. Turns out she was fair. She was very fair. She was also working with the wrong information. She doesn't contact Connor. There is a version of this story where she does, where she calls him, or sends the kind of message that requires a response. She understands the appeal. She understands why Isla almost did it, and why Bex spent months deciding against it. But what Gemma has decided is that she doesn't need to. Not because she's being gracious, and not because she's suppressing anything. Because what she wanted, what she's been missing for 18 months without knowing it, was the correct story. She has that now. Not from him. From 2 strangers who knocked on her door because they were tired of carrying an incomplete version of the same thing. That's its own kind of answer. And this is where I want to leave you for a second. Because there's something that happens when you've been told a version of a story that was just whole enough to keep you from looking for the rest of it. You don't feel deceived. Not immediately. Not clearly. You feel like you missed something. You turn the introspection inward. You wonder what you could have seen. And what I want to say, what I think you already know, is that the architecture of a managed exit is designed specifically to produce that response in you. The uncertainty is not accidental. The smoothness is not generosity. You being the last one to understand the full picture was not an accident. It was the whole point. Which means the clarity you're reaching now, whatever version of Gemma's story maps onto your own, is not a failure of your earlier instincts. It's information that was withheld, and you're allowed to update with it. There's a story I've been sitting on that's a different kind of reckoning. The moment you realize the person you thought was your ally was the one writing the narrative about you the whole time. I think you need to see it. It's the next one. I'll see you there. I'm Hani. People always show you who they are. Wettedy just slows it down. I'll see you in the next one.